Hi guys, my name's Connor. I'm a science fiction, political, and philosophy nerd, a Marine Corps and law enforcement veteran, and a Never Trump Republican. I am going to be reviewing Drew Pavlou, a militant liberal, confronting Stephen Bonnell's son, Nathan, on his radicalization into the dissident right. We are going to try to be critical, but we're also going to try to be empathetic to a young man finding his way in the world. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring these gentlemen on and see if we can make some hay.
A bunch of stuff was going on.
No, okay. Thanks for joining. Everything okay?
Yeah, I needed to get a bunch of stuff done, and then also like the audio and stuff.
No, okay. Thanks for joining. So, listen, man. I don't want to debate, bro, or attack you harshly. You're a young guy, so I want to just try and talk respectfully. And listen, I'm a fan of your dad, so I don't want to. I don't want to have like a vicious debate or anything, but I do want to talk to you about your views, because you've said that you're a Nazi. You've said that you endorse Adolf Hitler. And look, these are pretty morally horrible views, in my view. Like you know, this man was responsible for arguably the worst genocide in human history, the mass murder of millions upon millions of people, and even setting aside the mass murder of innocents, I mean, he literally destroyed Europe. He destroyed Germany. So I want to ask you about these views. Where did they come from? Why do you call yourself a Nazi?
Well, I've done plenty of research. I keep doing research. I'm actually reading a lot of books now about this topic, kind of.
Could you tell us what are you reading for your research? What books are you reading on this?
Yeah, I actually have a bunch of notes. I can pull up those books. The book I'm reading right now, ironically, is Mein Kampf. I'm trying to understand the psychology of Hitler around the time before he was kind of who he is known as today. So one of the books I'm reading is it's kind of about banking loving, but it's more specifically about nationalism, where it came from. It's Balkan nationalism in the 19th century, exposing the roots of identity and conflict. It's not really a book; it's more of an article.
Okay. Well, I just want to know, like, where did this political path come from, though, right? Because obviously your dad is like quite a famous liberal. I want to know, like, so how did you go down this path of? I think it was about Nick Fuentes and stuff like that. What led you to those views?
I opened my mind up. I had more conversations with people in the alt-right and the far-right. And that's kind of it. I started watching and consuming more alt-right content too.
Okay, so you've consumed this alt-right content. I'm interested. So I remember.
All right. So let's go ahead and break down what we've heard so far. So far, in my opinion, Drew has really just asked, where is this coming from? You know, you've said that you're a National Socialist, that you've endorsed Hitler and you think he's a good guy. You know, where is this coming from? He's kind of repeated that question a couple of times. So with Nathan, you know, this isn't coming out of nowhere, and this is one of the more nefarious elements of the dissident right, is oftentimes they will give you, whenever you ask a progressive, actually, sometimes even when you ask me, where I'm like, 14 million people are projected to die over the next 5 years. And they're like, yeah, well, what's your source? And I'm like, The Lancet, here's the link. And they're like, yeah, well, this is just a projection. Can you even explain how projections work and how they might be off? Then I'm like, go fuck yourself. Because, sorry for using such profane language, but when somebody asks me that question, I typically don't think that they're actually trying to have me explain my understanding of statistics and projections and how they're realized in the real world. I think they're trying to get me bogged down in details because they're trying to effectively like debunk the details rather than contend with the main point. The main point is we cut $10 billion from international aid and it's going to kill people knowingly. Like we knew it was going to kill people. We did it anyways. We betrayed Ukraine. We stopped feeding them intel. We stopped giving them timely military shipments. We knew this was going to screw over Ukraine and result in civilian deaths, and it did. So at that point, I don't feel like you're asking those questions in good faith. However, with Nathan and with young men, that can come across like, well, you're not really that defensive of your point. You just want a virtue signal and then run away. Whereas with the dissident right, if you seem like a curious fella, then they're going to feed you endless dissident right-wing propaganda, and they're going to feed you endless sources. And so that's like one of the things about being closed-minded and kind of being dismissive of curious people is Nazis they love curious people. They want to feed curious people endless amounts of information. Now, it's bad information and the information sucks, but, so especially when you're young, you might not have that level of discernment yet. So just to summarize, though, he's reading Mein Kampf, which I've read as well. So if we get into details there, then we can discuss those. He's reading about banking, lobbying, and nationalism in the Balkans in the 19th century. That's interesting. Then he's had lots of conversations with people in the dissident right, and that's how he's been recruited into the position that he's currently recruited into.
Destiny, you went to the Holocaust Museum with him.
Mm-hmm.
Did that have any influence on your views?
No, not really.
Why is that? I'm interested.
I didn't pay too much attention to the memorial. I looked around, of course, some of the stuff there. It was sad, but I was kind of critical of a lot of the stuff I saw there, especially one of the doors for the supposed gas chamber. Yes, it was wooden, and yes, it had handles. That kind of clicked in my mind. I thought that was kind of strange, and then as I explored more of the memorial, that kind of solidified my opinions in a way.
So you actually say that going to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. made you less trusting of historical evidence about the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
Could you explain that a bit further?
Right. So number one, the shoes, and I was very critical of like the shoe exhibit. All the shoes, in like the shoe part of the museum, they had like a little plaque next to it explaining the story behind it. I thought that was strange, and I don't believe the story behind the shoe thing. I think it's much more simple than what they're trying to lead on. And then also the shoes, they don't actually look real, and it's not like, well, they look like real shoes. I just don't think they're specifically from each camp or anything like that. And then also the photos. There's a corridor you can go down, 2 walls, huge. There's a bottom level and then also another top level. I was in the middle level. There were a bunch of pictures on every wall. A lot of the pictures looked kind of strange. They didn't look natural. Some of the pictures were real because from when I was like 11 researching the Holocaust, I seen some of those pictures, and yeah, they are real pictures.
So this is actually, weirdly enough, I would be pointing this out to my child. So Nathan says that he's read tons of books, Mein Kampf, banking, lobbying in the Balkans, lots of conversations with people in the dissident right. The exhibit was sad, but I was critical of it. And then we're getting into these like details. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because one of the things that we saw Natalie Wynn, Counterpoints, bring up in her conspiracy thing is that there's a formula to conspiracist thinking. And the formula for conspiracist thinking is appeal to anomaly, appeal to anomaly, appeal to anomaly, and then present alternative narrative. And so far, the thing is, it was sad, but I was critical of the events. The 2 anomalies that Nathan has appealed to are wooden doors with handles, and then the shoe exhibit. I don't believe. Well, he doesn't believe that the shoes are from the places that they claim to be from. He doesn't believe that the wooden doors are where they claim to be from. But that's the interesting thing is like, if we just go to what is it, like Ordinary Men Holocaust Police book. So if we go to Ordinary Men, Reserve Police Battalion 11, and Final Solution in Poland, we don't even have to talk about the details. We can just talk about this, because these were cops who, my understanding is that these were firsthand accounts of how they were ordered to massacre 1,500 people in a city. And so for like 2 to 3 weeks at a time, they would just line up dozens or hundreds of people back to back to back to back and slaughter them in an industrial scale by executing them and throwing them into a mass grave. And how the camaraderie of them being a part of a unit and also a shitload of alcohol is how they perpetrated a massacre. And so we should just, in my opinion, I would cut right to the heart of that, which is like, well, do you think that on virtue of being of a certain ethno-religious background or having Zionist support for the state of Israel, should you be, rounded up based off of your ethno-religious background and executed? Because we know that happened. Like we descriptively know that happened. Not only do we have a high probability that the Holocaust happened, but I think even Nazis would admit that this kind of shit happened. So that's where I would start, is I would start from moral foundations. But I'm actually curious how much more we're going to see that formula of anomaly, 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 alternative narrative. Gen X says way more will die now because of Maha and RFK's utter destruction of our medical system. I'm not going to be surprised. Watch John Oliver's Maha story if you haven't yet. Well, I can only take so much damage at a time. Wowman542 says, calling it now. Hassan will likely try to platform Nathan to further defame Destiny as a sex pest, bad father, to discredit him and unfuck America tour. Well, that's not going to be great if it happens. Melody says, I'm guessing a lot of his family in Nebraska is Republican, so if it's just so it happens to be interested in his stuff. Interesting. So, all right, let's continue for the sake of flow.
Some of the pictures where Jews being transported to camps. That's real. That happened around 1941, 1942 in Poland and closer to Germany, South Germany, kind of. That happened. So I'm not saying all of it's fake, but I'm saying that a lot of the pictures, or the fact that they had a fake Hitler quote on the wall, that was strange to me. And then the fact that some of the pictures looked a little weird, and then also shrinks a bit.
Can you explain what is your actual position here? Is your position that the Holocaust did not happen?
Yeah.
It didn't happen. So there were no killings of Jews. There was no persecution of Jews by Nazi Germany. In your view?
I'm not saying that the Holocaust isn't persecution, and specifically mass murder and the targeting of Jewish people in World War II. That's what the Holocaust was. I'm not saying that Jews didn't die. I'm not saying that they weren't persecuted. I know they were persecuted. In 1936, that's when it was really bad for one of the first times. When Hitler was in power, and then also there were killings of Jews. There were Nazi death squads that specifically targeted Jewish prisoners in concentration camps. I know that happened.
So I just want to clarify. So if you said earlier you're reading Mein Kampf. In Mein Kampf, there are hundreds of pages that Hitler devotes to expressing his hatred towards Jews, how he wants the Jews to be pushed out of Europe, etc. He sees the Jews as basically this existential pestilence. So you would be quite obviously you would understand quite obviously Hitler hated the Jews, but you don't believe he persecuted the Jews.
I don't think he said that. If I heard correctly, there was persecution and killing of Jews in 1936. There were horrible pogroms. There were targeted killings of Jews in the concentration camps. So I think this is a question of degree. Now, I would still, call this like Holocaust revisionism or Holocaust denial or whatever. But I think we need to cut to the core of the moral argument, which is like, should you kill people for their ethno-religious traits? I would hope in a liberal society we can largely say no. I would hope that Nathan would say no.
Is he there?
Sorry, my Wi-Fi cut out.
So I'm just trying to work this out. You're reading Mein Kampf, and in Mein Kampf, Hitler expresses over hundreds of pages his absolute hatred of the Jews. Would you agree with that?
Yes, he does.
Okay. but you don't believe that he persecuted the Jews when he came to power. I'm just trying to work this out.
I never said that. I explicitly said, yeah, Jews were persecuted when he came to power.
Okay, and do you support that? Oh, geez, cut out again.
I hope that cut out again, and that's not just Nathan staring into the camera. Why are we giving this kid attention? Because he's emblematic of hundreds of thousands of young men who are being sucked in by the dissident right. That's why.
He's cut out. It's pretty sad how hardcore his views are on this.
Crawling Chaos says, I'm not saying the Nazis mass murdered Jews, but I am saying they did it sort of. Well, dude, that's the thing. It's like even talking to Nick Fuentes, with the cookies analogy, he's like, well, I don't think it was 6 million. It might have been like a few 100,000. But again, you can cut to the moral core. The moral core is, should you be able to kill people for their ethno-religious background, regardless of whether or not they're a part of some nefarious cabal to overthrow society? The answer for anybody who's sane and believes in individual rights, individual responsibilities, protection from the state, Republican governance, the obvious answer is no. And so that should already put, fascist Germany and to some degree authoritarian communism, that should already throw them into the evil bucket of history, right? Collective punishment, collective murder, all that kind of stuff. It's, in my opinion, very barbaric, very Old Testament, very cruel, very disgusting, very repulsive, anti-human. And it's the kind of shit that needs to be left in the dustbin of history. So if we're already admitting that fascist Germany did these things, why would we try to rehabilitate the philosophy of fascist Germany? And that's the thing. Regardless, if Nate's doing this for attention, or if he's doing this to piss off his dad or give a middle finger to the world or whatever, or if he actually thinks like, oh, hey, I'm researching these things and actually I do think that there's something here. Regardless of his motivation, we shouldn't be trying to rehabilitate fascism and authoritarianism, which is what is effectively happening.
Question.
Okay.
In some ways, not all aspects of the persecution, but in some ways, yeah.
So wait, sorry. Okay, let me just clarify that question again. So when it comes to, so you agree that Hitler hated Jews, and you agree that he persecuted Jews when he came to power.
Yes.
And I'm asking, do you support the persecution in that way?
Overall, yes. In some aspects, no. But if we're
Dude, that's already too long of a pause. In some aspects, yes. In some aspects, no. All right.
just saying yes or no completely, then I'd have to be leaning more towards yes.
Why? How can you lean towards yes when it comes to the active persecution of millions of Jewish people?
So before I answer this, I'm just going to do a quick explanation on why they're persecuted, in my opinion. Jews in Germany have been the reason, well, not the reason, but they've been the targets of a lot of hate and persecution throughout in Germany throughout years.
Yeah. So Kay says, and I'm assuming as mods, we're not allowing any bullying of a minor child in chat, even though everyone here is 3,000 IQ moral actors. That's right. Just do suspensions because people might not know that we're the angle that we're trying to take in this. So they might come in crazy being like, oh, look, Dusty's such an evil piece of shit and his kid's a dumbass. But for the people who are in chat right now, we're not dunking. Okay. Listen, we're not dunking. We're approaching this as if Nathan was an extended part of our family. And if we had somebody in our family who lost a little bit of their shit and was saying some crazy shit, and we wanted to address their arguments earnestly because we wanted them to hear us. That's the approach. And so Gen X mentions that he addresses morality later. I'm going to find that pretty interesting because if I, no offense, guys, but when Vosh and I think Steven to a degree have argued for moral nihilism or cosmic nihilism, and I'm not saying that Stephen argues that all the time. I'm just saying that he's entertained it as a hypothetical, and I think I've seen that before. I think this is the natural outcome. I think the natural outcome is when you say, well, technically there's no such thing as good or bad, and good or bad is all subjective. And to some degree, we can look at like morality and humanism as something that can guide us. But realistically, you can evaluate everything within its consequences. Then everything becomes arbitrary. And not only does everything become arbitrary, but you can't hold on to simple, basic moral conceptions like killing people for being a part of the wrong group is bad, right? Like we should be able to agree on that. But for the moral nihilist or the cosmic nihilist, they actually say like, oh, hold on there. Hold on. The universe doesn't really care about humanity, and one less human might actually be beneficial to all of society. Like it's all that fucking it's all that I have 3,000 IQ, so technically nothing is good or bad. It's very fucking annoying. And anybody over the age of like 25 who is a moral or cosmic nihilist actually bugs the fuck out of me.
Even before World War II happened, on the end of World War I, after the signing of the Treaty of Versailles, Jews were scapegoated almost immediately by the National Socialist Party. And
good to see you, Grassroots. Hey, welcome home. Glad your travels were safe. Good morning, party persons, and fuck this machine. Interesting.
Some
hello, Grassroots. Good to see you, King.
Communist parties too in Germany, they scapegoated the Jews and blamed them.
AF Racing says, where is the evidence that there are hundreds of thousands of young men being converted to Nazism? Well, I don't know. Do you just want to take a look real quick? Let's go to Rumble. I mean, technically, Nick is a Christian nationalist, so if you want to say that he's not a Nazi, that's fine. But I would say it's close enough to Nazism that I don't care. Nick Fuentes. So we got 19 hours, 100,000 views, 135, 370, 360, 474, 262, 125, 490. So we at least got tens of thousands of young men who are Christian nationalists who accept National Socialist narratives. Then we have what? Elijah Schaffer. Does he run his shit here? What's Elijah Schaffer's show? Where is he at? Google. And I hate Elijah Schaffer. He's actually a total fucking dumbass. Where is Elijah Schaffer's show? He used to work at the Blaze. That's on YouTube. Is he still on YouTube? But Elijah Schaffer is absolutely a fucking Nazi apologist. Like 100%. Like it's not even disputable.
Gee, man, I was worried that you were going to join, man.
If you tell me that you don't think Elijah Schaffer is a fucking Nazi, then I actually think you're stupid. I'm just going to look this up real quick and then we'll move on. Oh, slightly offensive with Elijah Schaffer. So 544,000 viewers. He's getting dog shit views. Looks like he only has a live section. I don't know if he's posted anything because it's like 2 months ago. So I don't know if he switched platforms. Maybe he's on Kick or something, but he got dog shit views on his own thing. But then I saw he has that dumbass MMA guy, and that dumbass MMA guy is a Nazi too. So anyways, I feel like my point is proven, AF Racing, even if you don't.
And I think there is actually conversation to be had.
Sorry. This is actually funny. My apologies to Nathan. My apologies to Steven for thinking this is funny. Yeah, my son's a Nazi. That's bad. What do you want me to say?
About that. Where Hillary's coming from is that he put blame on the Jewish people. He put blame on bankers, and he put.
Can I say this? You'd be familiar, for example, that there was a huge amount of. There were so many German Jews who joined up for the German army in World War I. They fought hard. I believe it was actually a Jewish officer who recommended Hitler for a military commendation during World War I. So I mean, you're saying that this is a scapegoating, that the Nazis started attacking the Jews after World War One, blaming them for the loss of the war and stuff like that. How's that fair? You're admitting that the Jews were scapegoated.
Well, it's fair because a lot of these bankers and stuff, they did pull out of Germany and they were somewhat responsible for the economic collapse of Germany. See, Jews started gaining a lot more influence in the British Parliament around 1917. A lot more Jews were inside British Parliament and inside governing, into politics inside the British government. Jews already had influence in Britain, and Britain had influence over the signing of the Treaty of Versailles. Jews and Germans have hated each other for so long, even before World War One. And
That's
for
not
the fact
true.
that
That's not true. That's not true. The German Jewish community was extremely well assimilated within Germany prior to the rise of the Nazis.
I mean, it depends on where you went. South Germany was kind of known for persecuting, well, not persecuting, but having a dislike for Jewish people before World War One. A lot of that came from Catholic influence or other things in South Germany. South Germany before World War One did kind of hate Jewish people before the National Socialists did.
Okay, so anyway, we're going back to your point. You say that the persecution justified because of this racial hatred. I just want to ask, why is it justified to persecute millions of people? I mean, where do you say that you agree with the person?
Okay, you guys are confusing the argument. I'm not saying descriptively it was hundreds of thousands. I'm making no descriptive claim whatsoever. All right, I'm making a moral claim, and let's. I am willing. So, for instance, like, I don't understand climate science. I don't. I understand that we put a shitload of carbon into the air. It correlates with a rise in temperature. That we can go throughout history, and there's CO2 levels that rise that correlate with temperature. But what's actually going on right now is we're supposed to be, like, nature-wise, based off of the cycles of cooling and heating, we're technically supposed to be during a cooling period, but we're heating up anyways. So realistically, if there's like a new ice age, carbon emissions could save our skin and actually save hundreds of thousands of lives, but it also could, destroy the environment. And we do see some evidence of pretty catastrophic weather events happening nowadays. Now, they've always been happening to some degree, but if the frequency continues to increase, then we could be fucked, right? So I'm like, I guess I'm climate skeptical, but I'm like 80% sold, 90% sold that anthropogenic carbon emissions and methane emissions actually could really fuck up the environment and fuck over the human species. And we're spending a lot of time and energy navel gazing when we should be doing something about it. But that's the same approach that I'm going to take with the Holocaust, where it's like, I have been told that there are dozens, hundreds, thousands of Holocaust primary sources, that they're all pretty robust, and that they all paint the same narrative. That the Nuremberg trials, we used German records on mass slaughter against the Germans at the Nuremberg trials. So I have a pretty strong instinct to believe. I also have Jewish friends who say, like, oh yeah, everybody past my parents got, like, wiped out. And the only reason why my parents escaped is because our family fled to America or New York, or fled to Israel and then moved to New York, or moved to Florida, or moved to this, or moved to that, or Texas, right? Pretty much every Jewish person I know, because a majority of them are European Jews, right? They all have some story of an extended family member not making it out of Germany, right? So the whole point is, like, I'm 99% sure that the Holocaust is a real thing and that it was millions of people. But with the moral claim, is it bad to line people up based off of their ethno-religious affiliation and shoot them in the back of the head? Yes. Is the answer yes? Then you shouldn't be a fucking Nazi, because Nazis were for blaming all of Germany's problems on a single ethno-religious group, depriving them of property, persecuting them in riots, hanging and bludgeoning random people, treating kids from those people like shit, like vermin. Like that was also well documented, was that Jewish children effectively went from playing with their German neighbors 1 year to when they came back, they were treated like subhuman golem on the verge of like, consuming their fellow children. And then eventually a healthy chunk of them were beaten or killed and ghettoized and dead from deprivation and disease. That's already all bad enough that even if we disputed the numbers somehow, we should be able to say, like, yeah, that's fucked up, and we should never instantiate that in any culture on the planet ever. Right? Right? We can just make the moral argument. We don't have to follow Nathan down each one of his appeals to anomaly. Just responding to a chat before we get back into the content. Will Aberley says, exactly, he's a child and his father doesn't see a point or value in his son's life. So why not treat this more like a play for attention from literally anyone? Because Nathan isn't the only kid. He's not the only kid. There's hundreds of thousands of other kids exactly like Nathan. So we're not just going to dismiss him and say, oh, you're a stupid kid. We're going to say, hey, this is why you're wrong. And even if you were right about some of the facts of the matter, you're still wrong morally. Bakar Baridi says, no offense, but it's laughable to trust Rumble stats. Rumble is known to be very botted, even more than Kick or Twitch. And it's still tens of thousands of young people. That's a problem, right? Jake Shields, sure. Yep, that's the MMA guy I was talking about. Silverjack Man says, we might hit those numbers, but I'll be surprised if a whole lot of them don't grow out of it at once. They get into the real world. Sure. That doesn't mean that you don't. That doesn't mean that you don't handle it. AF Racing says, I'm going to lurk today or it's going to go bad. I don't know why. I don't think I've said anything controversial. So Jackman says, holding the 9 to 5 really tends to tamp down on radicalism in my experience. You are too busy to be radical. Sure, but let's take a look at this. What is it? It's like 35% of young men. How many young men are NEETs? In the U.S., approximately 1 in 5 young men under 25 are considered NEETs, meaning they are not in employment, education, or training. This translates to around 4.3 million young people in the U.S. While NEET rates vary across demographics and regions, the figure highlights a significant portion of young men who are not actively participating in traditional pathways towards employment or further education. So 1 in 5 young men are NEETs. And I think they had like a stat on it where this is effectively increased by like, I think it's between 30 and 100% in the past 2 decades. In the past 2 decades, this stat has increased substantively.
Persecution, but that there was not mass killings. What do you think actually happened then?
Okay, hold on. I'm going to explain this again. Jews had influence in Germany. They had influence in German politics.
Sorry, Fashion 40 says 139 watchers, only 37 likes. Like the stream. True. Like the stream. Share it with your friends. Engage in chat. There's lots of really funny, interesting people there. Super chats if you got them. Memberships if you got them. Thank you for flying Counterpoints Airlines.
And they had influence in German banking. They had control over a lot of German banks and news, as they did in the U.S. So they did technically have some power in economic collapse of Germany after World War I and at the end of World War I. And again, you said I disagree with mass killings. I never said that I don't think mass killings happened. I said explicitly, yes, there were mass killings. But when it comes to the Holocaust, I do not think it was a mass industrial Holocaust. I don't think Germany was fully industrialized to exterminate the Jewish people. That's just not true. That's not something that happened. Germany did not change its entire industrial pathway to exterminate Jewish people. They did not convert.
Well, this is where you're wrong, Nathan, because really, even at the height of the war on the Eastern Front, the Germans were utilizing and removing a significant amount of rail stock for the transportation of Jews to death camps. So even at the height of the war, a significant amount of the German industrial capacity, the railroad capacity, was actually diverted to the mass killings of Jews. And the use of Jewish slave labor was a massive part of the German industrial effort during World War II. If you read Adam Tooze's book, The Wages of Destruction, you can see that it's actually impossible for major parts of German industry to operate without the use of slave labor by both Jewish and also just people all across Eastern Europe. There were millions of people who were inducted as slave laborers.
Okay, so number one, a lot more railroads to concentration camps.
Shaved Dog Butt says, just built a new computer, based.
Supply chains, stuff like that, transportations of Jewish people from camp to camp were bombed by the Allies during World War II. This is known. This is documented pretty well. And second fact, slave labor does not always mean genocide. Okay, there are so many other countries that were also using slave labor that weren't trying to genocide those people. Now, I don't get why you think slave labor would equal genocide when it comes to this case, because if they're using all of these people to continue their industrial output, to continue output of products for soldiers to use in the Eastern Front, they wouldn't be also genociding these people. They wouldn't be killing the people.
There was a selection process so that Jewish men who could work were put into forced slave labor. And there was no concern whether these people died in the process of the slave labor. So they were basically worked to death. And then people who were considered unfit to work were immediately exterminated. So this was the elderly, this was the young, this was a lot of women. So there were some Jews who were forced into slave labor, but they were worked a huge proportion of them were worked to death during the war.
Okay, so about that selection process, they did select those unfit to work to be killed. I know that happened. That's not exterminating them based on their race. That's just exterminating them based on their ability to work. They did that with other people too. They did that with political opponents that were put in the same camps as Jewish people. Yes, there were non-Jews in the same camps as Jewish people. It wasn't specifically Jewish people that were persecuted because they couldn't work inside these camps. Everyone was. And this is like, it's not, I'm not saying it's right that Germany did this. I'm just saying that the context doesn't make sense for it to be a genocide when, again, they're relying on these people to work, and if you can't work, you're just taking up space in these camps. Also, the sick were killed. It wasn't because they were sick and couldn't work, because some sick people did.
So you're admitting.
Okay. Hans Mayer says, Connor, why the 1%? That should not be. There's not 1%. Don't give someone even the slightest grace on this. Hans Mayer. Yeah, has anything worked? Right? Has your stuff, like, I'm not saying you individually did this, but has the progressive, self-righteous narrative worked? Has just going like, trans women are women, we can't talk about it, fuck you, and if you don't believe it, you're a bigot? Did that work? Or are we experiencing one of the most extreme right-wing backlashes in American history? Did BLM work where it's like, if you're not ACAB and defund the police, then you're an evil sack of shit and you deserve to die? Did that work? So when it comes to the Holocaust, the 1% is conceding to nuance or the possibility that I'm schizophrenic and that I'm actually imagining being a live streamer and having a family. Maybe I'm in a padded cell somewhere and I actually don't understand reality. So if that's like if you can't engage with nuance, then this conversation isn't for you. If you have to have this like purity of mind, then this conversation isn't for you, right? What I would need to do in order to say beyond 100% certainty that the Holocaust stuff is like, I'll show you. I'll just show you. Holocaust primary sources. So this is, I tried to do this earlier because I was actually really curious about going through this information. How do I click on this? The rise of Nazism, outgrades, understanding through testimony is absolutely fantastic. This is perfectly suited to schools who want to teach the Holocaust in just a few lessons, short enough to fit into any lesson plan, well curated, given an excellent piece of range of experiences showing the development of Holocaust over time. So let's launch the program. The Holocaust through testimony. So I would need to go through this. Start. Okay, so these are firsthand accounts. All right. So I would need some kind of verification that this correlates with primary historical documentation, right? And this isn't a criticism of this guy like Arnold Erlinger. He 100% could be telling the truth from his perspective in earnest attempt. Same thing with this gentleman. These could all be exact firsthand witnesses to the Holocaust. But you know what I need to know in order to know that these people are 100% telling the truth? I need correlated historical primary source documentation, and I need to know that the translation is accurate. And then I can go to 100%. That's all it is. It's all it is. It's not just reading somebody's interpretation of the evidence, but reading the evidence yourself. Here we go. Primary source database. So the interesting thing about this is I actually tried to do this. I tried to read the primary sources because the primary sources had like inventories and shit. And with the inventories, I need to like read this in order to know what's going on. So for instance, open image and tab. Fam name, I know that. Kirkeling. Vor name Herman. Gecham. I'm assuming his date of birth, 12/6/01. So he was born in 1901. In Leglin. So I would need to read all this shit. Anyways, I'm belaboring the point, but the truth is, if like 99% isn't good enough for you, then this conversation isn't for you.
That basically people who could not work were basically killed.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean genocide.
That doesn't mean genocide. So you can actually take millions of people, concentrate them into these slave labor camps. Half of them are exterminated immediately with gas chambers, and then other people are worked to death. And you're saying, oh well, it's not actually genocide just to work people to death while giving them no means of life, while denying them medical care, while denying them food. There was a systematic hunger plan. There was a systematic hunger plan in the sense that the Nazi camp commanders, they did not want to give enough food for two.
Okay, no, that's just not true. That's just not true. There were
all right, $10 from Gen X for donating to Save the Nathan Fund. Razzle says World War II is one of the most studied, analyzed, documented, and obsessed over events in human history. The official narrative isn't in dispute by anyone serious. Nathan's talking points are all bogus. Okay, demonstrate them. So feel free on Discord or Twitter to send me the primary source documentation about extermination camps. Because I've looked at the primary source documentation. It's in German. I don't speak German. So
specific meetings held to discuss how they can reduce loss of life in these camps, held by Nazi high-ranking officials. You can find this. This is easy access information. There were meetings held to learn how to combat illness in these camps, how to help them like have more room to live and stuff like that, so they're not crammed together as much as they were with the like population of these camps growing. There were specific meetings held to get them more food and supplies, while allies were bombing these transportations. Like
no, I gotta make clear, one of the biggest arguments against the Allies during World War II is that they were
Grassroots started a competitive fund for the Fuck Nathan Fund for $20. All right, so we have two dono funds. One of them is to save Nathan. One of them is to fuck Nathan. Well, not literally, okay? Like, Nathan is a bad guy. All right, let's rephrase that one. Let's change it from the Fuck Nathan Fund to the Nathan's a bad guy fund. How about that?
Fully aware of places like Auschwitz, and they didn't ever actually try to bomb the crematoria. They didn't actually try to properly stop these places from functioning. So why is that?
Well, they're not going to bomb. They're not going to bomb the whole camp. No, they're bombing transports. They're bombing transports, not the camp.
there are strong arguments to be made against the Allies that they didn't do enough to stop transportation of Jews to the camps. Like, for example, when hundreds of thousands of Hungarian Jews were transported to the camps, the Allies made no efforts to actually stop the transportation. They could have bombed the railroads. They didn't do that.
Maybe not at that time.
Hold on. Is that me or them?
He's dropped out again.
The deaths of Jews were exacerbated by Allied bombing.
Nathan, are you there? Nathan, are you there? Hello. Okay, you're back.
Okay. Anyway,
So for example, when there were Jews who escaped from Auschwitz, it was a very rare occurrence, and they brought the plans of what the Germans were doing to the Hungarian Jews to the Allies, and the Allies could have bombed the transports to stop.
Yeah. Actually, Beef Supreme, they worked you until you went to be exterminated or died. Mostly even children worked in the camps and had jobs, so to speak. Even when sent to a death camp, you could be chosen to live and help there. So, yeah, that's one of the things that I saw was there was this thing about useless eaters in Germany. And Nathan thinks that this is a point for him. Eaters, Germany. So, backdated order authorizes euthanasia program. This short letter on Hitler's private stationery provided the extra legal basis for doctors to give so-called mercy death to patients who were deemed incurably ill. Although it framed these deaths as euthanasia, this order actually authorized the mass murder of people with disabilities and protected the men and women who performed the killings from potential prosecution. Nazi propaganda argued that these people were so-called useless eaters. As German policymakers prepared for war, they began to view people with disabilities as both a genetic and financial burden. The order was issued in autumn of 1939. However, it was backdated to September 1st in order to connect it to the start of World War II. This program came to be known by the codename T4 after the address of its central office at Tiergartenstrasse in Berlin. Under the program, patients were murdered by gassing, lethal overdoses, and starvation. So I've actually seen this thing. I've seen video of this where they started the euthanasia program with like vans for gassing, and they went to, the vans right here. And so they went to various like asylums, and they just started wiping out the disabled people. And so right here, like Nathan's appeal is that like, oh, well, they weren't exterminating these people based on their ethno-religious background. They also did it to political dissidents, and they also did it to other people. So, or they also did it to disabled people. So clearly they weren't exterminating Jews just for being Jewish. However, let's cut to the moral core. Should we be killing disabled people? Should we be killing political dissidents? Should we be killing people from an ethno-religious background specifically if they're not of use to us as slave labor? I think the answer is no. Okay? And if you can't land on no from a moral analysis, then you are a fucking Nazi, right? You're a Nazi, you kind of suck, and you should be treated poorly. I'm not going to do that, obviously, because we're still trying to charitably understand Nathan as much as possible. But if you can't say all of this shit is fucking evil, then I don't know what the fuck your problem is. Nathan's a teenager. I think some people have said he's 16. Some people said he was 14. I don't know. But yeah, is killing disabled people based? The answer should be no. Ratzel says, what I don't understand is why are his parents still allowing him to have internet access? I can't imagine what my parents would have done if I was posting this stuff. I'm not going to criticize Steven and his mom's parenting techniques, but if I was doing this shit, I absolutely would have been banned off of social media, every internet device that I had taken away, and I probably would have gotten spanked as a teenager. I don't know if my dad was strong enough to spank me as a teenager, but it probably would have happened. Possum Nation says, I had my adenoids out. It sounds like Nathan needs them out. It also changes personality depending on how much they are blocking breathing. Interesting. Yeah. Whatever, 4690 takes the same skeptical perspective that I said. I am 99% sure the world is round, but there's a 1% chance I could be wrong. Yeah, I'm just holding out. I'm holding out the possibility that I'm an unreliable narrator. I try to tell you guys reality as I see it, but I could be a schizophrenic. Sacred Snow says, if you want to demonstrate to anyone in chat whether or not the moral proselytizing works, just point out LB's popularity in stream. Almost everyone vehemently dislikes her. Messaging for purely the proselytizing ideology aside. Also, everyone in chat knows her, so it's a relevant example. Well, I mean, I like LB just fine, and she's triggered some of my best one-guy rants. But yeah, I would say that whenever she moral frogs about something, it substantively reduces my chances of agreeing with her. Hans Meyer says, I'm German. I saw the logs photos and there's no purity of mind on this. Okay, well then psychically transplant your understanding of German primary sources into my American brain. If you can do that. Beef Supreme says, I'm throwing tomatoes at the Holocaust deniers. All right, well, I don't think there's that many, bro. I think we're doing okay. Crawling Chaos is 14 years old. He should be having fun with his friends, but instead he's reading about the Holocaust and getting the wrong info. Oh, yeah. Come to Germany and visit Buchenwald. All right. Well, dude, I've been to like Anne Frank's place. I've been to places in Europe. A time traveling IRL streamer would be funny as fuck. Oh, Jesus. Well, kids are arguing semantics, but thinks it's a defeater. Well, I mean, I agree right there. There's still there's still plenty of moral argumentation for why his perspective is bad and evil.
The mass transport of Hungarian Jews, hundreds of thousands of Hungarian Jews to Auschwitz, who were to be exterminated, and the Allies didn't do that. So you're saying that
they sometimes did. Actually, they did sometimes bomb transports. There's examples. I think around 1942, Americans started bombing these railroads, along with other bombings near where the old German Polish border was to cut off transportation of Nazis to the Eastern Front. They also bombed railroads going to concentration camps.
There you go. Wowman 542 simplifies it. Let's unite around the donos of the Be Normal / Bully Nathan Fund. I think that's more appropriate than what we landed on the first time.
They killed some Jewish people as they were being transported. The reason that we're not taught this is because America knows this is them killing innocent.
True Zealot says, not really sure how I feel about spotlighting a minor like this on stream. Is there a greater point for this content, or is it just for the views? Yeah, I said it at the beginning of the stream. I'll say it again. We're not here for chud dunking. We're not here for criticizing Steven. We're not really even here for criticizing Nathan. What we're here for is the fact that 1 in 5 young men are NEETs, which means that they're not in employment, education, or training. They are going online and being radicalized by various ideologies. So we're contending with their levels of arguments as if they were a part of our family. And so let me go ahead and do it for you, okay? Because I understand that like Gen X is saying that this content is making her skin crawl. I understand it. So he's reading tons of books. Okay. He's reading Banking, Lobbying, Nationalism. Can't really simplify that. Lots of conversations with people in the dissident right. The Holocaust was sad, but he was critical of it. So the door handles is an anomaly. The wooden shoes is an anomaly. He's skeptical of it. He admits there was persecution and killing of Jews. In 1936, there was a horrible... So let's go ahead and... he acknowledged that anti-Jewish pogroms happened. Admits that there were targeted killings of Jews in concentration camps. He thinks there were mass killings. He believes that there was Jewish influence in German politics. So don't believe it was industrialized. I'm still taking a look. Slave labor doesn't equal genocide. And we're going to come up with moral questions when we're done summarizing. Compares it to contemporary genocides like the Turkish Armenian. He didn't say the Turkish Armenian genocide, but mentions that useless eaters / political dissidents were also killed. So it wasn't purely an ethno-religious slaughter. So let's summarize what Nathan already admits that Germany did. Germany selected an ethno-religious minority to vilify. They had race riots. They had targeted killings of that identity. I guess race riots is incorrect. It's although I guess race, I guess you could use that term. They enslaved people, mass killings, and killed, disabled people, political dissidents, and the vilified race. So the question is right here, if you're a fucking neo-Nazi or you're a Holocaust denier, or you think that Hitler was a good guy, or if you think that Germany was overly simplified as a villain in World War II, that doesn't really matter. Within a debate, I can ask you, do you think that we should select specific ethno-religious groups in order to vilify, and we should punish them collectively, similar to how we're treating Muslims in the current era? Should there be race riots that target people of that vilified community? Should we do targeted killings of that identity when they're incarcerated? Should we enslave those people to our benefit? Should we engage in mass killings of a tribal group? Should we kill disabled people or political dissidents or oh, thank you, baby. Could I have a water refill as well? Thank you. Should we engage in killing disabled people, political dissidents, and the vilified race because they are useless eaters? And if the answer is no, then why the fuck are you rehabilitating Nazism? Why are you rehabilitating fascism? Which is, that's all that this line of inquiry and all these appeals to anomaly do. So yeah. So True Zealot, sorry if this content makes you uncomfortable, but I'm trying to do it as responsibly as I can. I'm not going for chud dunks, and I'm not trying to be dismissive.
People and then blaming it on another country. That's why we're not really taught the fact that America bombed so many transports with Jews being transported at the same time.
I want to clarify here, Nathan. You admitted that the Nazis scapegoated the Jews after World War I. You admit that they used them for slave labor.
Silver Jacket Man for 10, which is mean, but he did pay me. This is for Nathan looks eerily like Henry Spencer from Eraserhead. I don't know the reference, but he does have a nice Zoomer haircut, and we all think he looks very handsome.
You admit that they were persecuted. You admit that they killed many of them. You admit that people who couldn't work in these camps were killed. So why do you still support them? This is the big question.
That is the big question, and Drew Pavlou just cut to the heart of the matter. I need to fast forward again.
Okay.
Okay. So this is the question. So this is the question.
No. I heard you. The reason why I overall support them is it's not about the slave labor and stuff like that. And
okay. Whatever 4690 says, and now the Jews are ethnically cleansing Palestinians. Does that excuse what Germany did? Let's say whatever 46, that's bad, right? Whatever 4690, it's bad. If the Jews, because again, I'm reserving my 1% of skepticism. If the Jews are creating conditions under which they want the Gazans to flee to Jordan or flee to the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt, and they want to put such pressure on the population, and I'm not saying this is specifically happening, I'm saying it's quite possible. If Israel is doing that in the attempt to get Palestinians to relocate to Jordan or the Sinai, that's bad, right? We can agree that that's bad. We can also agree that all of the sins that he has admitted to Germany doing is bad, right? We can get there together as a community.
Hold on, let me real quick. You're taking Germany as an example and then making it seem like it's one of the worst examples in history. Almost every other country was also using slave labor.
So hold on. Jack Dorr says, so funny Connor only touches on Holocaust revisionism when it's a 14-year-old child making the claim. He is afraid. Jack Dorr, please tell me. So is vilifying an ethno-religious minority a good thing? Are race riots that are indiscriminate and target that racial minority good? Is the targeted killing of that identity when they're incarcerated good? Is enslaving people good? Are mass killings good? Are killing disabled people who are political dissidents or vilified race political or disabled? Is any of that good? Because we're admitting, even with all the Holocaust revisionism, Nathan is admitting that these things happened. So if these things happened, are these noble and worthy of replication? Jack Dorr, I look forward to your answer.
Say that Germany is evil for using slave labor. And
In the 1930s and 1940s, in the 1940s, mate, slavery was abolished 100 years plus before. The British
they were using slave labor in Africa. They did enslave Africans and force them to make things.
The British banned slavery at the start of the 19th century. America obviously banned slavery after the Civil War. You're talking about slavery being practiced by the Germans in the 30s and in the 1940s, in 1944, 1945. Right at the height of World War II, they're using millions of people as slave laborers. I've got a Polish friend, for example. I've got a Polish friend whose grandfather was a slave laborer in Nazi Germany. So this is the question.
Kay says, I think pointing out the money and Jew hatred and Jewish conspiracy is helpful to show the motivated reasoning countering it by exposing the financial interest because that's a pillar of Jew hate might help. Well, Kay, that's one of the things that you look at historically, and it like bolsters anti-Semitic argumentation. So medieval Jewish banking, because this is the narrative, by the way. So the narrative is that in money lending, there was a Christian prohibition on usury, and Jews were barred from vast sectors of the economy. And so as a result, Jews participated in banking, and then they blame the disasters of the Crusades and the disaster of military wars on Jewish bankers rather than on the Christian kings who launched the wars. So, yeah, I mean, we can point it out, but then it's going to be like this descriptive claim of like, oh, well, actually, I think the Jewish bankers of medieval Europe helped the kings, kill each other because they were anti-Christian bigoted, right? And then if you're pro-Jewish, then you're going to say, no, that's fucking stupid. Christians are their own moral agents. So if we launched wars against each other and Jews happen to finance them, that's kind of on the Christian community for launching those wars, right? So I don't know if that helps or hurts. Silver Jacket Man says, my dad always said if he couldn't kick my ass, he'd hire somebody who could. Oh, nice. Beef Supreme says, yep, my grandma would tell us about this. You either worked or were sent away and never came back. People already knew what was happening. They did this to anyone that Nazi determined to be less than. Yep. Gen X says, that's what it is. I was saying in an ear infection related, but adenoid sounds right. Oh, for his like throat or something? Sam says, this kid would just make an argument about how they had to lock Jewish people up. Okay. Oh, okay. So if you're a part of an ethno-religious group, and some segment of that ethno-religious group is engaged in nefarious behavior, we should lock people up based off of that ethno-religious group. So because George Bush invaded Iraq, I, Connor, as a cultural Christian, should be incarcerated. It's fucking stupid. right? Wow, man says, actually, Connor, you are a schizo. Every chatter here is one of your alternate personalities. There is no stream. There never was. Well, I'm holding out a 1% chance that that's true. AK About Us Away says, we rail on the Nazis because they are a more modern example and it's more evil than they should have empathy from out of group humans. There are other examples of empires that mass murdered. Bro, I would say that China's engaged in this shit now. That's the other thing that maybe I want to wake you guys up on. Thank you, baby. China has selected the Uyghurs as an ethno-religious minority to vilify. There have been anti-Uyghur race riots. Now, there were terrorist Uyghur attacks, but there were also anti-Uyghur race riots. There were targeted killings of those identities, particularly the militant ones. They did enslave those people and put them in work camps. There's alleged mass killings where effectively in China, they're doing the organ harvesting against any political dissidents. And I don't know if they killed any disabled people, but effectively what they've done is they've made it with the Uyghur culture that you either stop being Muslim and convert to the Han Chinese cultural dominance, or you get disappeared. So in my opinion, China might not be as evil as Germany is in scale, but they're definitely as evil as Germany is in like moral action.
Why is this acceptable? Why is this? I mean, all you've got is just basically whataboutism to say, oh, well, other countries used.
If you guys want to bump me to 99.9, Kay says, as a Jew with Holocaust survivors in my family, 99% is okay. I wasn't alive. I can leave 1% because I didn't witness it personally. Give me 0.01%. Okay. Give me 99.9%. The Holocaust happened. Millions of people fucking died. Okay. And then we can fight out these details. But the whole point that I'm trying to make is that you don't even need to get to 6 million dead to morally indict Germany for some of the most evil shit that human beings are capable of doing to one another. So, all right. Anyways.
Slave labor, therefore Nazi Germany can use slave labor in 1944 and 1945. That's crazy. That's not an argument for slavery. That's not an argument defending the Nazis. It's just whataboutism.
Sorry. Grassroots says, I still remember the day my grandma saw my mom raise a hand to me and said, that boy is too big for you to be hitting him with your hands before handing her a skillet. Holy shit. Will Aberley says, with respect, you missed my point. If one of the children I cared about started spouting off about the Holocaust, I'd never validate their point of view by engaging in a political argument. Okay, he's almost an adult, Will. And it's not just Nathan. That's the other thing. It's not just Nathan. It's hundreds of thousands of young people. And if you don't contend with their argumentation seriously, they just go on the internet and they find dissident right-wing people to hang out with. That was the whole question that Drew Pavlou asked in the beginning. He's like, how did you get radicalized? And Nathan was like, I'm reading a ton of books. I read Mein Kampf, and I'm trying to understand Hitler's psychology before the war. I've read an essay on banking, lobbying, and nationalism in the Balkans in the 19th century. And I guarantee you he's in a Discord with plenty of dissident right-wing freaks who are constantly entertaining and encouraging his political argumentation. So your whole thing of like, well, I'm not even going to deign to address your political perspective with a response, that shit doesn't work. Not with the hundreds of thousands of young men who are currently being radicalized on the fucking internet. If you want to do that in real life, sure. Hun says, yes, it is, but the neo-Nazis are not concentrated on the Jews. They don't like brown people. The Nazis are all in on their deep basements, and they're only an absolute microscopic minority. Okay, and they still kill people. They still influence American politics. Are you paying attention? All right. Anyways, let me continue.
Is he cut out again? Internet. Oh, wait.
Better, my PC.
Okay.
All right. My wife brought me breakfast, so I am going to mute myself while I eat.
All right.
Okay, so here's my response to that. Yes, British did use forced labor. It wasn't as bad as the Atlantic slave
AF Racing says, I don't think you'll find any German streamers interviewing trying to have good faith arguments with Nazis. This is wrestling a pig in shit. Welcome to the internet.
trade. But yes, there are examples during World War II of France and Britain using forced slave labor. Near Central Africa, the British used forced slave labor. Then also in East Africa, British forced like tens of thousands of Africans into similar into like projects like colonial labor camps and stuff. And then in Kenya, there's also an example of this. A squatter system was used to promote British slavery in Africa. They used slave labor just as much as the Nazis did, if not.
So now, because we've followed him into the appeals to anomaly and moral equivalence, we're arguing about impressed labor in the British armed forces during World War II, instead of just saying like, hey, bro, but you think like forced labor in general is bad, right? Whatever says, saw a march in the US with 40K demanding Sharia law. Was I given fake news? No idea. 40,000 people demanding Sharia law. Pro Sharia march in the United States. In pictures, anti-Sharia protests across the United States, anti-Muslim marches held in several U.S. cities, march against Sharia meets opposition in Syracuse, anti-Sharia groups counter-protesters clash. So, I mean, send me a link, bro. I'm seeing anti-Sharia protests, not pro-Sharia protests. So let me know.
Not more. The Nazis weren't using slave
No,
labor.
this is just straight up. This is a straight up lie. The British banned slavery.
See, now you're arguing the argument instead of the morals. I wouldn't even bother. I would actually just say, okay, people did evil shit in World War II. Of course. I think that Germany did explicitly evil shit. We're arguing on a continuum of evil shit. Do you think that slavery is good or bad? Because that's what we're getting to. Because with a neo-Nazi, with an American neo-Nazi, what we're talking about is they have a policy prescription. And the policy prescription is dispossessing Jews of political and economic power in the United States, likely expelling them from mass deportations, killing the ones that are not willing to get deported, and or killing their sympathizers if they resist the authority of the state. It involves probably, they talk about like American stock, that African Americans are part of the founding American stock. And so they'll tolerate African Americans, but they'll resegregate. So effectively, like black people just get totally cut off from all of society. And then when it comes to Hispanics, you know, they're mixed on that, because if you're a Hispanic neo-Nazi, you might want some of the Hispanics to stay, but everybody else who's coming into the country in future generations, they need to be a Hispanic Nazi. And if you're like a Northern European Nazi, then you want to kick out all the Hispanics south of the Rio Grande. So while these all seem like absurd and impracticable, you just kind of need to cut to the core of whether or not these people think these ideas are good. And that's where I would appeal to Nathan on being like, well, if you say these things are good, you're a fucking schizophrenic, right? What does your life look like? You're a young white man hanging out disproportionately on the internet, hanging out with political dissidents who have no hope of achieving power, and you're wasting your life. You're wasting your time and energy. Let's go fucking laser tag. Let's go airsoft. Let's, you know, when you're 21, let's go to the fucking bar, you know, like let's go live a life that's worth living. So America repulsed by what this young man is saying. I understand it, but I don't blame him for being a schizophrenic internet freak. We're all schizophrenic internet freaks. He just landed in the wrong social club. So in order to get him out of his hole, we need to get him into the right social club. And I'm also not talking about Nathan individually. I'm talking about in general. If you have a friend who's schizoing out, you need to try to take them to places to be normal.
slavery at the start of the 19th century. They spent
I don't
massive
care if
amounts
they
of doing.
banned it. They still used it. You can say like
They
making
spent a
something
massive
illegal.
amount.
There's
They
still
spent a
people that are gonna do it. They're
They-
like
they
go
spent a
search it up
massive
right
amount.
now. British slave labor during like World War II in Kenya. Search up the British squatter program in Kenya. How about you do that?
there is no comparison to the industrial scale
Whatever 4690 says. The Holocaust was bad, Connor. Thanks, buddy.
level of slavery.
Okay,
that
so
took
now we're
place
gonna say
in-
there's no
in-
comparison when I've
I-
already proved that there are examples of this. Yes, there is
The-
comparison. They're
the-
doing
the
the same
German-
exact
the
thing. The
Germans
only
used
difference
millions-
is that Jews are being targeted by the Nazis and black
No,
people are being
no,
targeted
no,
by British
Nathan,
and French.
Nathan, they took millions of people, and it wasn't just Jews. They also took millions of Poles. They took millions of people all across Eastern Europe, and they.
I
forced them
don't
to work
care
slave
who
labor.
they took. The fact is that both of these people are taking people and using them for slave labor. I'm not saying this is right.
I'm not conceding to your point. However, we both agree slave labor is bad, right?
But to say that the British are genociding Africans, but the Nazis are genociding Jews because they have to do some hard labor it's dumb and it's an
What about Belgian Africa? Because this isn't Holocaust. This isn't genocide, as far as I know. Belgian Congo atrocities. So in the Belgian Congo, Belgium under King Leopold the something was an asshole, and he got in late for the scramble for Africa. So he wanted to make up for lost time by producing a substantive amount of shit. And so they enslaved the locals. They made them harvest rubber. They beat the shit out of them. While they were harvesting rubber, and if they didn't meet their rubber quota, they cut off their fucking hands. So we can agree that this is evil as fuck, right? This is bad. This is very bad. We shouldn't do this. We shouldn't enslave other human beings, force them to do hard labor, beat them if they don't do hard labor, and then cut off their hands and feet. And by the way, look at this. So here's a man who is forced to engage in rubber extraction, and he didn't get his quota, so they cut off the foot and hand of his daughter. So just tell me this isn't some of the most evil shit that you've ever seen in your entire fucking life. This is some of the most evil shit that I've ever seen human beings do to other human beings. And if you want to say oh, well, it's not a genocide and everybody was doing slavery, no offense, but fuck you a little bit, right? Is that fair? Is that fair to say that the Belgians weren't necessarily engaged in a genocide in Congo, but they killed millions of people and they enslaved millions of people? And it was evil as fuck? I'm good with that. I wonder how Nathan feels about that.
Jews just had to do
oversimplification of history.
You're basically saying that slavery, forcing millions of Jewish men into slavery and stuff like that during World War II, and then working many of them to death, is just Jews being forced to do a bit of hard labor.
I mean, to an extent, yes. There was a racial biased picking of these people, sure. But to be fair, every other country was doing this. I'm not saying it's right.
There's no comparison. There's no comparison to the.
Well, how is there no comparison? Tell me, how many Africans were worked to death by the British in Africa?
The Nazis killed more than 10 million people in the whole. If you can.
Drew is a Commonwealther. He's from Australia, so he might feel a compulsive need to defend British colonialism. I, as an American, feel no such compulsion. And I can just say, yeah, the Brits did fucked up things. We agree these things are fucked up, though, right? And we don't use one bloody hand to wash the other.
not just the Jews who were killed, but also the millions of Poles who were killed, the millions of Soviet prisoners of war who were starved to death, the millions of people. Like, they had a plan.
Connor, the U.S. and the British did the same thing during World War II. Hitler had the idea of eugenics from U.S. policies. Holocaust revisionism focuses on very specific and false claims like gas chambers. Okay. So, Jack Dorr, you're going for the Allies did bad shit too. That's your argument. Okay. Let's say for the sake of argument, I admit that bombing Dresden killed a shitload of civilians. That doing the fire bombings in Tokyo killed a fuckload of civilians. That the nuclear bombings killed a fuckload of civilians. That there was like racial segregation, racial animus, and race riots in the United States in the early 20th century. And that also we sterilized tons of young people, like young disabled people. Tons of disabled people. I don't think we euthanized them. I think we sterilized them. So will you admit, like this is a specific question, Jack Dorr, is invading your neighbors bad? Yes or no? Is vilifying an ethno-religious group, regardless of the character of the individuals of that group, bad? Yes or no? Are engaging in race riots to target people of an ethno-religious group and beating the shit out of anybody you can find from that community bad? Are the targeted killings of that identity bad? Is enslaving people in general bad? Are mass killings bad? Is killing disabled people, political dissidents, and the vilified race bad? If you say, yes, all of these things are bad, but the Allies are fucked up too, I kind of don't give a fuck, especially if you don't want to reinstantiate these policies in the early 21st century, because effectively what we're doing is we're having a conversation on like history. I think you're wrong, but we're having like a post-fact conversation on the truth of history. However, if you use these series of historical facts that the Allies are also bad in order to justify reinstituting some of these policies and hostilities and these ethno-religious tribal hostilities and violence, then I think you're an evil piece of shit.
For example, to starve like 80 million people to death in the Slavic
find an order for this? Can we get Hitler on the line to tell us where you put that?
We actually can. So this is why I did my reading prior to this debate. So, for example, we've got Goebbels' diaries. Let's go to Goebbels' diaries.
Okay.
Hitler's remark on 19 March 1942, the Jews must get out of Europe. If need be, we must resort to the most brutal methods.
Okay, hold on, stop right there. I have something to say about that. Now, I think, honestly, the Jews had multiple opportunities to leave Germany before World War II happened. The Jewish lives, like the amount of...
Why is that on them to leave if they've been there for centuries?
Jews killed in the Holocaust, I pointedly blame that on the Allies, okay? Before the Holocaust was even considered...
Why?
And to be like a thing, like at all, by anyone is... Before then, the Jews had multiple warnings saying, hey, we don't want you in this country. How about you get out now? And then the Jews that still stayed after those warnings, they were...
You were familiar with the fact that they were expropriating Jewish property in doing this. They actually forced many Jews to pay basically an exit tax to leave. So how can you actually say, oh, they had multiple opportunities to leave? And also the Polish Jews never had any opportunity to leave. What about the Jews in North Africa, the Jews in France, all these Jewish groups across all of Europe who had no opportunity to leave. They were just living in countries that were invaded by Nazis and then were occupied by Nazis.
Okay, now here's why I blame it on the Allies. Because Great Britain...
Why?
And France, they had no reason to declare war on Germany. They declared war knowing the politicians, like Churchill, he declared war... No, not Churchill. The prime minister before Churchill, he's the one that declared war on Germany, I believe.
And what did Germany do up to that point? Because I'm pretty sure, like, what were the German borders when Britain declared war? 1939. So, German borders, 1939. So we have they've already invaded Czechoslovakia, Austria, Eastern Prussia, which is like chunks of Poland. Then it looks like, if I'm looking at this correct, they've taken some parts of Eastern France. Now, I don't know the exact lines, so, you know, you'll have to forgive me. But it looks like the expansions went into maybe Belgium, the Netherlands, and France. So you already had Germany invading all of its fucking neighbors. And the whole goal of this was Lebensraum. Lebensraum. Lebnsraum, where effectively it was the living space of the Germans, where the whole goal was to create like an ethno-religious caste system with Germans at the top. And some other Europeans might be tolerated as like second-class citizens of enlightened cities, but plenty of races, excuse me, but plenty of Slavs were deemed like Untermensch, and therefore dispossessed of property, killed, partisans were hunted down, civilians were, you know, hunted down if they were believed to be part of the partisans. What part of that doesn't justify war? Right? I don't understand this like revisionism where you can invade your neighbors and start persecuting the indigenous population and be viewed as the morally correct party when other people declare war on you. What the fuck is that logic? Sam says, I'm saying this kid would be forced to look Jewish people up because they were destroying the country. Yeah, it's idiotic, but that will be his argument. Sure. But then that's dumb as shit, and we can contend with it on its own grounds. That effectively, like, let's say that we held all Muslims, like similar to what we did in World War II with the Japanese. Somebody brought that up in chat. So Japan attacked us. There was a Japanese couple that hid a downed Japanese pilot, and as a result, a couple of people in Hawaii got killed. And that started an anti-Japanese panic where we, against the Constitution of the United States of America, we interred and sent people to internment camps, concentration camps, if you will, but concentration oftentimes has an infinitely more nefarious implication. And in the internment camps, we effectively segregated all of the people of Japanese descent in the West Coast, from the West Coast of America, in camps in the heartland so they couldn't assist a Japanese invasion. Violating the rights of millions of people is viewed as one of the most fucked up things the United States has done. Now, it's comparably less fucked up than death camps, comparably less fucked up than forced labor camps along ethno-religious lines. It's also comparably less fucked up than slavery, but it's still pretty fucked up. So effectively what you're saying is America, because the Jews are so bad, and even the innocent ones are a part of this giant ethno-religious conspiracy, we should repeat one of the worst moments in American history. That's fucking stupid. That's stupid as shit, right?
Because Nazi Germany invaded Poland.
Yep, and I can name two pacts that they had before World War II. They had two non-aggression treaties. 1921 was Poland. No, 1925
France and Germany
was a non-aggression pact.
France and Britain were allied to the Poles. They told Nazi Germany
pact, not an alliance.
Okay, Nazis obviously broke the non-aggression pact by invading Poland. Would you not agree?
Like they invaded Poland for their own reasoning. They British and the French, they weren't gaining anything out of that non-aggression pact. They were saying hey, we're not going to attack you. You don't attack us.
Nathan, let's be clear here. They signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact with the Soviet.
Is it good to not invade your neighbors? Another simple moral question. Should you invade your neighbors in order to treat their citizens as second-class citizens that you can dispossess of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? My answer is no. That is bad. You should not do that.
Union, they carved up Eastern Europe into spheres of influence, and they actually did basically a co-joint invasion of Poland with the Soviet Union. and they killed millions of Polish people. And you made a post the other day. You said, "Oh, the Nazis were a shield against Bolshevism."
Yes, they
in
were.
Europe.
Oh, okay.
Okay, why?
No, you
If that's the case, what? Nathan,
Let
if
me
it's the
explain
case,
that to
no,
you.
no, let me finish.
Okay. Jack Dorsey says revisionism focuses on very specific and false claims like gas chambers, human soap, skin lampshades, 6 million claim, wall of eyes, masturbation machines, etc. Okay. To what end? Right? To what end? So let's say like the masturbation machines was some fucking anti-German Holocaust theory that was broadly supported at one point, but people have stopped talking about it over the past 50 years because they realized there wasn't as much evidence for it. And I think the gas chambers is still going to be contended because I think that there's actually, they did use gas, like, I'm pretty sure there's video. When we were talking about the useless editors or useless eaters, excuse me, I'm pretty sure there's like videos of them using the gas fans. So we still result with the same moral questions. And so Jack, because you bothered to write up that thing, you still have to answer the moral question. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure I asked you the moral questions 2 or 3 times. So I would ask you to contend with the moral questions.
First,
Okay.
Nathan, if it's the case that they were a shield against Bolshevism,
Okay.
why did they do a co-joint invasion with the Soviet Union? They actually brought the Soviet.
Completely,
They brought the Soviet border right up to.
completely out
They
of
brought the Soviet
like,
border right up to Nazi.
self-interest. The Nazis only wanted that because it's like going to jail and saying, "Hey, I'm gonna fold your lunch."
Jack Dorsey saying we euthanized disabled people. So history of involuntary euthanasia. Euthanasia became a subject of public discussion in the United States at the turn of the 20th century. Felix Adler, a prominent educator and scholar, issued the first authoritative call in 1891 for the provision of lethal drugs to terminally ill patients who requested to die. In 1906, Ohio considered a law to legalize such forms of euthanasia, but it did not make it out of committee. While much of the debate focused on voluntary euthanasia, other calls for involuntary euthanasia were vocalized as well. In 1900, W. Doc McKim, a New York physician and author, published a book called Heredity and Human Progress. This book suggested that people with severe inherited defects, including mentally handicapped people, epileptics, habitual drunks, and criminals, should be given a quick and painless death by carbonic gas. Weird. In January 1938, the National Society for the Legalization of Euthanasia was formed and was renamed the Euthanasia Society of America later that year. It advocated for the legalization of euthanasia in the United States, primarily by lobbying state legislators. Many prominent ESA members advocated for involuntary euthanasia of people with mental disabilities, including Ann Mitchell, a former asylum patient and main financial supporter of the ESA until her suicide in 1942. Ann Mitchell is also credited with structuring the ESA as a eugenics project. ESA's first president was Charles Potter, an ex-Baptist minister who advocated for coercive eugenic sterilization and involuntary euthanasia. The ESA initially advocated for both voluntary and involuntary euthanasia of people with severe disabilities. Okay, Jack. So I just pulled up Wiki. There are the T4 program in Nazi Germany resulted in 200,000 dead people. Is there an equivalent involuntary euthanasia program in the United States that Wikipedia is just too cucked to publish? I would be curious what your source is for that. Saying that some people in America had dog shit ideas and then Germany copied it and then implemented it is not the same as the United States engaging in the same program, is it? Especially within a free society. So my suspicion is that you're trying to sanitize the German reputation by saying that Americans did the same thing. But then when you actually Google it, no, America didn't. So if you have evidence, I'll look for it. Conservatism says, now that you're back from DC, when is the beard turning red? I get paid by YouTube on the 20th. So I would say sometimes it takes a day or two to process. So either end of this week or early next week. I will absolutely do that to honor that donation. Reading a few chats before we get back into it because I am starting to flag a little bit. Matthew Mendoza says, yes, same with Hispanics, specifically around Texas and New Mexico and Arizona. True. Will Aberley says, Connor, I'm not saying ignore them. You can't tell me there's a valid understanding of what they're talking about. Why not ask them where their interest in the subject comes from? Well, I mean, I think I said that. Camille says, I never understood why they didn't just put the bad Jews in prison if they committed a crime. Why did they put Jewish kids in camps and kill them? Nazi apologia fails here. Yep. Ved Sunil says, I'm quite convinced that half of American Latinos will become white the same way the Italians, Greeks, Poles, and Irish did. Me too, actually.
And I'm gonna do all this stuff for you if you promise to protect me or not fight me in jail. That's what happened. Nazis knew they were smaller than the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union did want to expand further west into Europe. That's why the Nazis signed that non-aggression pact, because as long as they appeased the Soviets, they are going to be able to continue growing. And the Nazis did gain things out of that. They gained.
This is the crucial point. It wasn't a defensive pact. They actually did a joint invasion of Poland with the Soviet Union.
Jesus Christ, Hansmeier. I must say, the Holocaust was extremely bad, but if we Germans set our minds to it, we do it right with the most efficiency. I'm going to share a cringe joke that I did just to lighten the mood a little bit because it's very serious. We're also probably only going to go for like another 30 minutes or so. Just to make sure that, you know, we pace ourselves with the brain damage. However, there was a Jewish guy that my parents were friends with, and sometimes we go hang out at their house, and I did it as a dad, not as a dad, as an adult. I hung out with this guy. And one of the interesting things was he was like, wow, you know, Germany tried to take over the Europe 100 years ago, and now the EU with Angela Merkel is acting as a way for Germany to dictate the fate of Europe. If only the Nazis had lived long enough to see their project completed by somebody else. And I said, well, one thing you can say about the Germans is that they're very efficient. And that went up like a fucking lead balloon. But tell me I'm wrong. Sorry to my Jewish folks, but tell me I'm wrong. Congo wasn't Belgian, it was Leopold's private colony. Okay. Was Leopold from Belgium? Was he the king of Belgium?
And the Soviet Union was in no position to fight against Nazi Germany during this time period because there were the Great Purges by Stalin, where he basically purged the entire officer corps of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was a basket case during this time period. There was the Holodomor, there was mass famine in the Soviet Union, the entire officer corps were being purged. There was no genuine threat to Nazi Germany whatsoever. What Hitler did is he actually signed a pact with Stalin, and they decided to invade Poland together, destroy the Polish nation state, bring the Soviet border right up to the Nazi border. So how can you say, oh, this is a shield? This is a shield against the Bolshevist threat. When they literally...
Whatever 4690 says, YouTube link equals 40,000 Muslims flood streets in Michigan for religious march raising red flags. Okay. 40,000 Muslims. If we have 40,000, Dearborn is like the heart of, you know, Islamic ethno-religious concentration in the United States. And if they do a religious march, but they're not explicitly saying, hey, let's create a theocratic state, I kind of don't give a shit.
Actually invaded Poland together, and he actually helped. He actually gave the Soviets a free hand to invade the Baltic states and invade Finland. He helped the Soviets actually expand their power in Eastern Europe. It doesn't even make sense. If you're saying that this was all a defensive pact to try and forestall a Soviet invasion of the Nazis, mate, they were a basket case. They had purges, they had famine, and as part of this pact, they actually allowed the Soviets to invade Finland and to actually invade the Baltic states and invade Poland. They brought the Soviet border right up.
What do you think National Socialism means, real quick? Do you think National Socialism and communist and like Soviet socialism are the same thing?
Of course.
Just say yes or no.
No, I don't believe that.
Gen X says, just wait, they get to the bad good morality part. Do you have a timestamp by chance? Because we're hitting 2 hours and we broke down 30 minutes, which of course I'm a yapaholic, so you know that's not surprising. But yeah, if you had a point where we got to moral, I don't really know how to search transcripts.
Yeah, National Socialism is neo-Nazism.
Okay, so tell me why they would be allies together.
McDevin77 says, I'm falling into the alt-right pipeline. If you could take me to a bar and pay my tab, I think you could save me. I'm roughly 6 rum and cokes from neoliberalism. So true, bro. So true. Oh, that's funny. All right, I'm gonna let these I'm gonna let this line of inquiry play out, and then I'm gonna scrub and look for morality.
Tell me why. Hold on. Before you answer this, I just want to make clear in Mein Kampf, the thing you love to tell me about how much Hitler hated Jews. I think he honestly hated communists and socialists way more than Jewish people.
That's not true.
I was about to say that's not true, and especially if you get into Mein Kampf, he blames the Jews for creating the preconditions for international socialism and communism, and he views those ideologies as a subversive Jewish plot. So he actually starts out Mein Kampf talking about socialists and communists and how he viewed those as threats to the national identity of Germany. However, then like halfway through the book, he's like, it's all the Jews. The Jews did everything. I stubbed my toe today because of the Jews. The Jews stole my dog. You know, the Jews stole my girlfriend. Like, it actually gets very, very anti-Jewish about halfway through. Oh, God, I'm exhausted. All right, anyways.
And he believed that all the Jews are communists.
The first people persecuted by the Nazis were the communist Bolshevik.
Sorry, Grassroots with the dono. $20 says Destiny and his son go to Germany so Destiny can save him, and Nathan tries to push him into a rail car for no particular reason. Yeah, not surprised.
And the socialists of Germany, because they were also blamed for the economic downfall of Germany after World War I. Okay, the Jews were blamed for the signing of the Treaty of Versailles, and then.
He says Nathan is making moves. Can't just ignore him because he's a kid. Asking Destiny for permission is so cucked. Laughed my ass out, Connor. I'm being respectful to a friend. Okay. Somebody was asking me this the other day. I think it was Mrow, M-R-O-W. He's like a drama streamer or whatever. So he was like, hey, Destiny keeps doing all this crazy, edgy shit. Why do you keep working with him? And I'm like, well, you know, here's all these tactical, political reasons for why Twitch and YouTube politics, we can all do this fucked up shit, but we never really get canceled unless we go to jail. And he's like, yeah, but shouldn't you, based off of morality, shouldn't you do X, Y, Z, A, B, C and just grow out of your own shit? And I was like, well, truth be told, at this point, Steven and I have hung out like, I don't know, 3 or 4 times. We've gone shooting twice. He's obviously like an intelligent guy. He's obviously charismatic, rhetorically gifted. He's funny, all that kind of stuff. He's a little sociopathic sometimes, which worries me. But at the same time, like, I would consider myself Steven's friend. So if I ever stab Steven, it will be to his face. I won't backstab him. I will front stab him. And if there is something that I would do for one of my IRL friends, I will do it for Steven if he asks. So I understand that you can view it as a form of cuckoldry and that it's all content and all that kind of stuff. But I basically just wanted to establish with him, like, one, if you tell me don't do it, it makes me uncomfortable, I won't do it. And then 2, I wanted to explain, like, hey, I'm not doing this to chud dunk on Nathan or be like, oh, Nathan's such a dumbass and Steven's such a bad guy. Blah, 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 blah. That's not the point of the content. The point of the content is to contend with it seriously as if Nathan was a community member. So, as if he was one of our friends.
Other political grievances that Germany had during and after World War I, and partly economic, mainly the banking system. But communists, socialists, and Marxists, and all those people, they were targeted because they were a genuine threat to Germany. Germany wouldn't just randomly make like an actual military alliance, an ideological alliance with the Soviet Union when they are polar opposites. And it's
then why did they do it then? Exactly, that's the point. Why did they do it then?
It was completely strategic to protect Germany against the Soviet Union.
Okay, can you explain?
Germany hated the Soviet Union, but they were somewhat looking up to Stalin because Adolf Hitler was somewhat looking up to Stalin because he somewhat admired Stalin. He admired Stalin.
Conservative liberalism will never be able to respond. Rest in peace. There was a flurry of wrenches and he was never seen again. So base, dude. That's what our just for a moment of levity through the content. Dodgeball wrench. God, this is how our mod team works. Okay, we get a bunch of like ideological curmudgeons, and they start throwing tools at you, and you have to be smart and fast enough to dodge tools. If I had endless amounts of time, I would find all the people that we have banned over, the years, and I would like label them, and I would like motion track. I would like motion track the wrenches being thrown at people. One last time. One last time, because this is what just happened to Jack. Awesome segue. All right, let's scrub for morality.
It's like ability to. This is true. The Polish people, they European playing Russia. They could use Poland's invasion of Poland. Families can move in. They were given enough money to pay those taxes.
Nathan, let me point this out. It's not morally acceptable. It's not morally acceptable for you to.
There's the word moral, so I need to listen to that.
Say, oh well, the Jews had a chance to leave. Therefore, when they didn't leave,
why are we talking about war and morals? War, like when you are in a war, there are no morals. There are
bullshit. So that just makes you a fucking terrorist. That just makes you a Hassan simp. So if there's no war, if there's no morals in war, you should be able to kill every man, woman, and child. You should be able to do whatever you want to them before they die. No, fuck that. It's unironically evil. This is just apologia for evil.
Are laws, but there are no morals. Morals and politics do not go hand in hand.
Exactly.
Bullshit.
So you're admitting that it's not moral. You're admitting that you don't care about morality whatsoever. It's demonic. It's literally satanic, man. It's literally satanic.
True.
I said, I don't like innocent people dying, but I'm not saying that.
You're familiar with. There's a great point here. Only 3% of the Holocaust victims were German Jews. 91% were Jews from Eastern European countries invaded by Germany. So they didn't even have a chance to leave. They were literally invaded. They had nowhere to go. What are they supposed to do? And you're just saying, well, war has no morality. So you can just slaughter anybody, just exterminate entire groups of people, millions of people. And you think that's not evil. That is evil. Like 99% of people think that is evil. It is an evil view.
Okay, I'm going to say this one more time, okay? One more time. Take a good listen. War sucks. War sucks.
I agree with you, which is why Hitler is wrong for starting the war.
He did not start the war. The war started when Britain declared war on Germany for no reason.
How about the reason was he invaded his neighbors? We just took a look at a map of 1939, and there was already like Austria. Like what was already in there? Sorry, real quick. I like being precise. I don't want to say that he already invaded Poland. So 1939 German invasion map. Oh, we do have parts of Poland. So I don't know the exact timeline of the declaration of war, but we have Austria, we have Eastern France, and we have parts of Poland. And we have East Prussia. So yeah, 100%. Well, what the fuck? Why can't you declare war on somebody who's invading and annexing their neighbors?
Reason.
It wasn't for no reason. It was because Nazi Germany invaded Poland.
They didn't have like any sort of like real motivation except the fact that
no, invading your neighbors is bad, and you want to nip it in the bud so you don't have World War II.
They don't like German people. They don't like German people. They don't like that the Germans are getting a chance to have some sort of power, to have some sort of breathing room. The standard in Europe after World War II was that Germans are lesser people than every other nation in Europe. Britain hated Germans. French.
Wait, so British and French cultural supremacy is the reason why Germany invaded its neighbors to the east. Awesome.
The French people, they hated Germans. The Russians hated Germans. The Poles hated Germans. Everybody hated Germans after World War I. And the only reason that all these people declared...
Wait. The reason why everybody hated Germany in World War I is because Austria declared war on whoever they declared war with, and Germany backed them, which then caused, all the multilateral alliances caused World War I, which killed millions of people and bankrupted Europe. So yeah, some of that shit might be unfair. The Treaty of Versailles could be unfair. That's totally fine. I totally understand all of the criticisms of the post-World War I treaty era. However, they kind of did bankrupt the continent by starting a world war, and then they were on the verge of starting another one. So what? So because Germans were treated poorly post-World War I, invading all of Europe was actually justified. Nathan, this logic sucks.
One Germany, they didn't have any sort of real motivation outside the fact that power is shifting.
Real motivation. They invaded Poland. They destroyed a whole country of millions of people.
What significance does that have with Britain and France?
It does.
True Zealot says, a bit behind, but did Connor just say they're marching for Sharia in Dearborn? No big deal. Call me when they're advocating for theocracy. Sharia law is theocracy, right? Do I have to do this now? I have to do this now, right? Because I have some center-right conservatarian people who are worried about the Muslims, the Muslims. 40,000 people, Dearborn March. Abarim March in Dearborn recalls procession and March for Justice. 21 years ago, Imam Husham al-Husseini led a group of worshippers from his Dearborn Mosque in a procession to a park about 2 miles away to mark Abarim, a holiday that recalls the death of the leader in the 7th century. Since 2004, the annual walk has grown in size with many more participants and dozens of tents and stalls set up providing free drinks and food for the march. That's the largest outdoor religious gathering of Shia Muslims in the U.S. On Saturday, August 16th, the 22nd annual Abarin procession was led once again by al-Husseini, a cleric who leads the Karbala Islamic Education Center, which celebrates its 30th anniversary this year. Similar Abarin events are held by Shias around the world. Today, the whole world needs the meaning of the movement of Imam Hussein. Al-Husseini told the Free Press, referring to the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad slain in battle in Karbala, Iraq, in the 7th century against an unjust ruler that Abarin recalls. Al-Husseini's mosque is named after the city where Imam Hussein fought. They're talking about equality, justice, and freedom. I don't know, bro. Find me the thing where he's like, and that's why the Empire of America needs to fall, is because Islam shall reign supreme. Find me that quote. I already found you the article. You find the rest of the details. Otherwise, it's just Muslims being Muslim, which is scary. Muslims being Muslims is scary, but also Muslims being Muslims is cool, and they can be nice, and they can be chill, and they can be cool. So, don't hate a bro just because he wears a weird outfit. Talk to him. See what's up with him. See what his life is like. Valor says, funnily enough, I just watched your video why everyone betrays Destiny. The reason you said you didn't betray him was because you had a real life job. Do you think that's changed forever? No, I think the reasons have changed, weirdly enough. Anyways.
I'll explain that to you. Britain's foreign policy for more than 100 years was to try prevent the consolidation of the entire continent of Europe against Britain. So they didn't just exercise this policy against the Germans. If you are aware of even the most basic facts of history, they exercised that policy against the
Captain Nemo. The more I learn about this Hitler fella, the less I seem to care for him.
French. That's why the British actually enforced the entire continental blockade on Napoleon. When Napoleon came close to consolidating all of Europe under the French Empire, then the British basically waged 15 years of warfare on Napoleon.
You're not denying what I said.
No, I'm saying to you, this is a fundamental part of of British foreign policy for more than 150 years, and it wasn't just employed against the Germans; it was also employed against the French. Their entire policy was they don't want the entirety of Europe to be united under one empire, and that's British foreign policy. Just as you think
Britain wants to say that.
Okay, whatever 4690 says, if you click the link, the YouTube link I offered, you would see Death to America. Then what I would unironically do, let's say that there's Muslim people who are saying Death to America. I would have local law enforcement identify that person. If they have a visa, their visa gets revoked and they get deported back to whatever country they came from. If they're a naturalized citizen under 5 years, then they get denaturalized and deported. As a matter of fact, like support for terrorism or terrorist organizations is one of the things that you can be denaturalized for. Death to America, I don't care if it's symbolic, metaphorical, whatever the fuck, you can be denaturalized. You can get the fuck out and go to your fucking dick shit country, okay? Now, if you're a naturalized citizen greater than 5 years or you're a citizen, guess what? You got freedom of speech, freedom of conscience. And as long as you don't commit crimes, then you can say whatever cringe shit you want to say. Them's the rules. Them's the breaks.
They don't want another world war. And then what do? They declare war on Germany, and then they ask the
It's the UK's fault that Germany invaded all of its neighbors. Okay, very cool, Nathan. Very cool.
Germany invaded Poland.
That doesn't have. They were in a non-aggression pact, man. They weren't gaining anything out of that non-aggression pact.
Sorry, explain that. Explain the idea of this non-aggression pact that somehow allows the Nazis to invade Poland and that not be an act of aggression.
All right, I'm good. So anyways, I would love to see Nathan's moral anti-realism, and that's actually something that I want to address before we kind of wrap up. In my opinion, moral anti-realism is super fucking cringe. I was actually thinking about this the other day. So if you Google morality is the definition of or the analysis of good and bad, right? So morality definition. Principles concerning the distinction between right and wrong or good and bad behavior. Now, a lot of people try to change, and then ethics, I think, is about definition. A set of moral principles, especially ones relating to or affirming a specified group, field, or form or conduct. Some people like to somehow differentiate moral analysis away from natural consequence, and I don't know why you would. They try to make morality this ephemeral, disconnected planes of the spheres analysis, and I don't think that it's arbitrary. We can be cosmic nihilist in that we don't know if the universe gives a shit whether or not the human species exists, but we ourselves are an extension of the universe, and we obviously care whether or not we exist. So to some degree, the universe does care whether or not we exist because we are extensions of the universe. Not only that, let's say that I went to a college campus and I put a razor blade and an apple on the desk, and then I said, I had 100 people lined up who all wanted to talk to me. And I said, which one of these should you eat? 100 out of 100 people are going to say the fucking apple. And the reason why is they are able to make a snap judgment based off of instinct on what's going to be good for them long term. Eating an apple, it's got vitamin B, vitamin C, it's got roughage, it's got sugar, it's got sucrose. This is good for me. Razor blade, indigestible. It's going to hurt me. It's going to cut up my mouth. It's going to cut up my stomach, and I'm going to die. And yet somehow moral nihilism, cosmic nihilism, leads people to make these grand pronouncements about the way that humans conduct themselves, where they effectively say the razor blade and the apple are arbitrarily good for humanity. And I don't give a shit for that line of argumentation because I think it leads to this kind of shit where teenagers like Nathan, they bumped into a series of contradictory arguments that are against what they were raised to believe. And then they're like, oh, well, it's all arbitrary. Who gives a shit? Why don't I take the edgier position? But they don't actually think about the implications of their edgier position. So anyways, thank you for being here. We're going to continue on with the content. I'm going to move into the next segment. I parasocially love you. Be sure to like the stream, share it with your friends. If you have a good time, tell them that you had a good time on the Counterpoints stream the other day. Super chats if you got them, memberships if you got them, participate in chat. We got lots of really cool, smart, funny, interesting people in our chat. I'm going to run. Thank you for your viewership. Thank you for your donations. Thank you for hanging out with us. Thanks for flying Counterpoints Airlines. I hope you have a beautiful day. I'll see you tomorrow.